I've wanted one of these for about 8 years now, and I finally got my hands on one. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're talking about the Gibson bolt-on neck series. That's right, we're talking about Gibson's Tele and Stratocaster today, the Marauder and S-1, with a focus on the Marauder, aka the Paul Stanley Kiss smash guitar. So these interesting beasts were birthed in late 1974 and lasted until 1979 as their main production run. Can you find them all the way until 1982? Yes. However, at that point, you were just kind of using up old parts. It wasn't necessarily in the lineup because it's in 1980 when the Gibson Sonex takes over as the budget bolt-on guitar, which you can learn all about in this episode, including seeing a very interesting prototype. So as far as Tele knockoffs go, Gibson kind of just stopped doing that, but you can still find some Stratocaster-influenced ones with like the Challenger and Corvus III series. You can kind of include the Gibson Victory model within that as well. But up until 1980, these were your three options: the Marauder, S1, and the L6 Midnight Special as far as Gibson bolt-on necks go. Bill Lawrence designed the pickups in each of these models. But if you're thinking, hey, I want to be a collector of Marauders, how many of these are you realistically going to have to buy? It's kind of like the Gibson Corvus challenge that I talked about. There are a lot, but what makes these even harder to understand is the fact that there's so many different specs and so many different layouts. So very early Marauders, they have a control layout that looks like this. They have a three-way toggle switch on the horn, they have a master volume and a master tone. Very basic. However, around 1976, they decided to spice this thing up with a rotary switch in the exact same position. So that means you could blend your pickups together to get different tones. Technically, that is superior if you're looking for more tonal opportunities. However, if you're just trying to get from neck, middle to bridge, it kind of makes it a little bit more difficult. But then the final control layout for these guys is the rotary switch down with the knobs, just to make the controls a little bit easier. This is also around the time when they start to introduce black pick guards on these instead of the white, and sometimes instead of the cool clear covers, you would also get the black covers over these. Now, there's not necessarily any specific dates associated with each, but that is the natural progression. Sometimes it just varies depending on the model. So there's three different iterations there, but if you're going for a gotta catch 'em all type thing, you can also find these made with maple bodies, alder bodies, or mahogany bodies. And there doesn't really seem to be a big rhyme or reason behind it. It just kind of seemed to be whatever Gibson had. And then to further complicate things, you can also find them in maple fretboard variation as well as rosewood. I've never seen an ebony, but the L6S did have ebony fretboards. It's possible you might find it. So in theory, there are a lot of different iterations of the Marauder out there. But if you thought all those iterations was bad enough, wait until we talk about the different colors you can find. Now keep in mind, all these numbers we're talking about just comes from a shipping ledger. That does not necessarily mean that's exactly how many they made, but it's the best number that we have short of gathering them all in a room and counting them. But there were 4,758 done up in a natural satin finish. Check out this cool episode of a new old stock one. I regret letting that one go. But then there were 1,368 in a wine red, 460 in an ebony finish, 240 in a sunburst, and then 202 in an unspecified finish. And those are just the 70s colors. In the 80s, sometimes you can find even more crazy exotic ones, like I've seen a bright orange. So perhaps that's what falls within the unspecified category. So there might be more colors out there than just that. So to find each color in each body and fretboard variation, as well as the three control layouts, yeah, that would be quite the task. Don't even get me started on painted headstock cap or not. The possibilities are limitless. But you might be wondering, hey Trogly, we haven't even seen the guitar we're talking about today. What's this history lesson all about? Well, my friends, today we talk about the 83 rarest Marauders, famously seen on the Paul Stanley Kiss advertisement right here, the Marauder Custom. Personally, I think there's more than 83 Marauder Customs out there, but less than 200 for sure, because these things pop up about once or twice a year, but finding one in clean shape took a while. But a viewer of the show sent me this one at their local shop, and I was able to convince them to ship it. Here is the beautiful Marauder Custom that I've been looking for. So you're gonna notice this one's just a little bit higher end looking, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really not that much different than a regular Marauder. So unless you're a collector, you really don't need the full-on Marauder Custom, because it's not like you get new custom pickups. It's still the Bill Lawrence designed ones. You've got the humbucker in the neck and your blade style one in the bridge. It still has the harmonica bridge and stop bar tailpiece. All of the Marauder Customs shipped in a tobacco sunburst finish, just like this one. But just because you have a tobacco sunburst finished one doesn't necessarily mean it is a custom. As we had just learned, there were a few regular Marauders also done up in this finish. But no, the biggest difference on a Marauder Custom comes down to having a multiply black pickguard that makes it stand out and look a little bit more custom. So that's something any current day pickguard manufacturer could make for you, so that's not necessarily that special. But this is the thing that you can't necessarily change. These things have a bound fretboard and you get the small block inlays, kind of like an SG standard of the era. It just makes them look a little bit fancier. So it's kind of like the very first run L6S guitars that had the small block inlays. But the Marauder Customs only had one fretboard option that I've seen, rosewood. Now, does that mean that the maple one doesn't exist? I don't know, it's possible. It could be out there. Anything is possible, my friends. But they didn't put any binding on the headstock. Still a scarf joint on top of being a bolt-on neck, so nothing necessarily special there. It's not like set neck construction is what makes the custom different. No, it really truly is just the inlays, binding on the fretboard, and a multiply pickguard. But what's kind of fun about these Marauder Customs is, I mean, you could technically pop one of the necks off of these and put it on a different Marauder body and just give it the fancy pickguard and say, ooh, I've got a cool custom color one. There'd be no way for anybody to really know. The only other color I've seen is Cherry Sunburst. However, looking at the photos in depth, I do believe that one has been refinished. But the only other thing to mention about these Marauder Customs is the fact that these actually have the 3-way toggle switch instead of the blend knob. I have only seen a handful of them that actually have the blend position. So technically, if you're going for 100% complete, there's at least 2 variations on this one. Does the third one exist out there? Maybe. But so far, I've only seen toggle switch and blend knob down here with our controls. But why exactly did the Marauder Custom even exist? I honestly think it's because Paul Stanley was like, hey, can we have a fancier guitar maybe? I'm tired of smashing these really cheap looking things. But as far as the price goes, I would imagine these were a lot more expensive for them to produce. And is it really worth it to dress up a bolt-on neck guitar within Gibson's lineup? Probably not. I would assume that's why they didn't make too many of these. But hey, we were just talking about the Gibson S-1. Is there an S-1 custom? Yes, there kind of is. You can at least see an S-1 that has the small block inlays on it in this old Gibson advertisement with Ron Wood. Now, I'd kind of purchased this one sight unseen from the shop. There's definitely a lot more cosmetic wear to it than I was expecting, but oh well, we can still document this cool piece anyways. So let's go ahead and throw this Norland era oddity onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Oh boy, that was a filthy guitar, but she cleaned up very nicely. Let's just go ahead and dig into all the good guts. Now, just like the L6 Midnight Specials, you really have to be careful with these pickups because they utilize really thin wires coming out of them, and since the pickups are epoxy coated, fixing them isn't exactly an option, or at least not an easy option. But thankfully, these are all pickguard mounted, so you're not really messing with the pickups too much unless one of your height adjustment springs breaks, which is a common issue on these. So I just bring it up in case you're ever working on one of these for that reason, that you're careful. Tearing one apart, the only thing you have to worry about is the ground wire not pulling off. I've always been fascinated by these pickups. They're just kind of interesting looking on the front and the back, although I can't really tell you too much about them. But our pickups within the circuit read 2.37 k ohms for this single coil. That seems kind of low. 5.6 in the neck position, and the middle, just for fun, 1.72. So we'll have to see if that sounds right, because I've actually never taken the ohm readings out of these pickups before. But here's what we're working with on our body. It's just a giant swimming pool route, so that's why it's really popular to modify Marauders. You can literally put whatever you want in these things, even those like triple wide humbuckers. But we've got some sort of a sign off here, JSH, and it looks like June 14th, 1970 something. This is a 1975 guitar, so maybe that's a 5 at the end, but it almost looks more like a 9. But that route juts off over here for our toggle switch cavity, and then down here for our controls, where you can actually see some of the bare wood exposed. But there's your toggle switch, and our pots date to 1974, the 12th week, so that's pretty early for a Marauder. And your output jack is this style. Now let's talk about our bridge and tailpiece. So this is what is known as a harmonica bridge. Gibson briefly used these throughout the 70s. Even a The Les Paul model has a harmonica bridge on it. But the Nashville bridge, it came out just roughly at the same time. So you can see the reason why they were doing these harmonicas is you have so much more room for adjustment. That way, if necks were slightly off or whatnot, they could actually be able to compensate for that. Or so the rumor goes anyways. Some of these will actually have a little recessed spot right here that says made in Germany because these are Schaller made. And other ones don't say anything, like this. It's kind of cool how they mount into the body. It's very similar to the Nashville style, except for your post is just completely different. It's a big cylinder, and then you got a little cylinder on top of that is slotted so you can make your adjustments as needed. Your tailpiece is the typical one of the era. We've got some chrome plating issues on this one, but it appears to be original. That's just our 3-way toggle switch, and again, master volume, master tone, speed knobs, and you do have the thumb bleeders on them. And you can see our cool swoop on our multi-ply pickguard. I see at least 3 pieces to this body. There's one right here, one there, another over there. There might be 4. Kind of hard to see because the end grain, they covered over in paint. But don't let my polish job fool you. I mean, this thing has nicks, dings, and scratches all over. It looks like there's something going on here where the clear coat was all chewed up, maybe even some sort of a touch-up. Definitely have arm wear. Lots of nicks and dings down here, a couple by their tailpiece. Cleaned up nicely, but it definitely has its blemishes. There's just so much gunk on this pickguard. That's why I polished it with it on to kind of help alleviate some of that. But moving on from our body, we go to our maple neck with a rosewood fretboard. And here's what makes the Marauder Customs very interesting. They have very rounded fretboard ends right here that they bind around. A normal Les Paul Custom, it's a little bit more squared off. Now they still round it a little bit, but this one's definitely a little bit more exaggerated. But I love these mother of pearl small block inlays. Again, just like what SGs were using at this time. It just makes it look a little bit fancier. But what's really unique about Marauders is the fact that most of them were Kalamazoo made. So that means you'll get the tortoiseshell colored side marker inlays. This example, they really stand out as red, although maybe not in this lighting situation. And we also get the bone nut, which is something that kind of disappears once you get out of 1975-ish. But I measure a 12-inch fretboard radius with a 24 3/4 inch scale length. And we've got a nut width of 1.71 inches. That increases to 2.04 by the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.81 and 0.92 by the 12th. Here's that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Just a nice rounded C. So by no means were these huge necks, but they are nice rounded C shapes, but more so on the 60s side. You've got the really low, flat, and wide frets on these. But moving on to our headstock here, unfortunately something kind of chewed this headstock up. I'm not sure if it was like a bug spray or something, but it literally just ate the lacquer off the top. I was hoping just maybe some of that would polish off, but nope, this is the best it looks after cleaning it. You've got scratches all over. I hate these rings around it because it means someone was lazy, they left the strings long, they wound it up, and the string just drug around it. It is 100% avoidable if you're just careful restringing your guitar. And despite being a custom, you don't get a Gibson mother of pearl logo. That would have really made these things absolutely perfect though if you got a mother of pearl logo. Maybe even go as far as putting a custom decal on here. I mean, if you're gonna make it fancy, you might as well make it ultra fancy. But this is what an original Marauder truss rod cover looks like. If you ever see one that has like a G under it and it looks like a pilot or something, that is not the original truss rod cover. Those were sold on eBay about 10 years ago. So people would pick those up thinking they were vintage correct, but no. If it doesn't say Marauder like this, it's not right. Something you might not have noticed is this is a Flying V headstock. So that means this is one of the first Les Pauls to feature a Flying V headstock. But there have been a few custom orders, and there's also the Billy Gibbons SG that has the Flying V headstock. Although to actually call it a Les Paul is not technically correct because we actually have these comfort carves on the front and back. But the general shape is about right. But the Les Paul name was not actually associated with this guitar in the slightest. Now, full disclosure here, this bottom screw has been replaced, and it's actually too thick. If you were to put that all the way through, you would go straight through the neck. So there's a reason it's like that, should I ever sell this and somebody sees that in the future. It's also worth noting that it looks like somebody put maybe strap locks on here at one point in time, and the old strap buttons that they put back on didn't quite fit, so they have these metal spacers underneath them. That's like that on both sides. And a couple of these screw heads are nearly stripped out, but they're still functioning. This definitely was a player. It's got a little bit of buckle rash back here and a whole lot of worming to go with it. I would say the worst thing condition-wise on this whole guitar is, I don't know what happened here. It looks like they chipped through the entire finish, so they put some sort of like an epoxy covering over it so the wood wouldn't dry out or something. The case has a similar material on it in some areas where they're like gluing down the Tolex. Thankfully, I don't see any neck pocket cracks, which bolt-on neck guitars are well known for getting. But the burst job does indeed continue on to the edges. There's that big ding we were talking about earlier. And then in this area right here, it wouldn't surprise me if it came from the factory that way. They just like buffed through the black finish, but it's also possible it could just be normal wear and tear. Now it looks like there was some sort of an identification sticker on this at one point in time right here. There's like a big ding through the lacquer, but man, this neck was awful when I got it. It was very gummy, so I took a lot of layers of stuff off of it. I had to polish it 4 or 5 different times just to get it to where it should be. You can actually see there is finish wear along the edge of the neck where the person just played straight through it. The same thing is true over here on the side of the neck. Slightly less ambered over finish area right here. Not highly noticeable in regular lighting situations, but in blacklight we'll see it. But I love this scarfed on piece of maple. It's got so much wood grain going on here, and the back of the neck is relatively untouched, so you can actually feel the original satin finish. This is how it would have left the factory, back of the neck included. It would have been a flat finish, whereas after all the years of playing it and polishing and whatnot, it has become a gloss. But it's my understanding that most of them started as satin, but I would believe this actually started life as a gloss. Just in case the scarf joint freaks you out and you don't want that on one of your guitars, you can find 3-piece maple necks on these as well. Just because you see one with a scarf joint, that does not mean it's necessarily a repair of some sort. They did actually ship those. So it's like a double reject guitar in the Gibson realm. Not only a bolt-on neck, but also a scarf joint. But here's some additional interesting things about this one. It still just has a Marauder decal. But that's because this one's from 1975. I think it's around 1976 they actually have a decal that reads Marauder Custom. But unfortunately our decal has started to peel, so we actually lost some of the E and the R. But the 99 leading serial digit tells you it's a 1975. And thankfully we still have our original Gibson Deluxe tuners, Clusin in style. It's very common for these things to get replaced on Marauders because the tuners just don't hold up to the test of time, unfortunately. And under blacklight, you can see what I'm talking about. The chip decal blacklights a little bit differently. The back of the neck all looks nice and even here. But like I was telling you, it would blacklight differently where the finish has been rubbed off on the edges. You can really see it on the treble side of the neck. It's pretty much all up and down. But that basically just shows you he was a cowboy chord player, and he also did a lot of lead work. So it's just nice and smooth. Back of the body's looking good. You can see that rash I was talking about. Some of the other marks. That touched up area, I guess you could say. There's another small touch up down here. Face of the guitar, you get a little bit of sweat absorption in this area. You got that ding / touch up here. After looking at it under blacklight, that's definitely a touch up, but everything else is looking the way I would expect to see. Then our headstock's looking a little bit goofy, so something happened up here that discolored the finish a little bit. And you could continue to take the rest of the finish off and re-clear coat that, but then it's not going to blacklight perfectly either, and you got even more stories you got to tell, and you're going to lose your Gibson decal. It's just not worth the trouble. Leave it alone. But all said and done, this one weighs 7 pounds, 6.2 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. It's got some charming tones to it with distortion. Now let's try it with cleans. tones go, I mean, it's good for certain stuff. I mean, this guitar is mainly a really cool 70s vibe. It definitely screams a little bit of Kiss. Now, as far as being super comfortable to play, no. I mean, even stock from the factory, these frets were just so very flat. So it feels like you really have to push down on the strings just to get to the frets. So as far as doing big bends on it, it's not the most comfortable guitar for that, but doing some rhythm work, great for that. So, what are my final thoughts on the Marauder Custom after finally getting one after all these years? Is it worth the premium that you have to pay to get one of these? Probably not. I mean, it's got the cool vibes, so in that aspect, yes. However, for the same amount of money, you could probably get yourself a brand new Les Paul 50 Standard, which is a infinitely better guitar as far as, you know, a player's thing goes. So overall, an enjoyable guitar, but probably not worth the money as a player. But worth it for the bragging rights as a collector or a Kiss fan. Because that advertisement just cracks me up. Kiss knows looks ain't everything. Well, at least they had the prettier one on that poster. These pickups, they're nothing fantastic, but they didn't sound half bad either. I think it'd be fun to like throw these in a Les Paul or something. But I will say, I did enjoy playing this one simply because I have the toggle switch variety. It's so liberating to me just to be able to go neck, middle, bridge. Those are the tones you're supposed to have. But I probably need to try one again because maybe you can dial in more interesting tones. But anyways, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.